I'm Dr. Sarah Olivo.
And I'm Dr. Liz Seidler, and you're listening to College is Fine, Everything's Fine.
We're excited today. We have something a little bit different, which I think is always a good thing. As you guys know, we do not think that psychologists are the holders of all things mental health. And some of the things that we know are on your mind at this point in the year might be how to make those connections for an internship, a potential job, just start to how to build your professional self. And we came across this book called The Coffee Code, and I thought it was such a lovely how-to. Very specific, very concrete, some great stories in there, and learned experiences from Marc and the people he's worked with, but just a really simple guide, kind of a step-by-step way to make conversations over something as simple as coffee. So we're excited to have Marc Reede come on here and talk to us a little bit more about why he wrote this book and how he came to know so much about these conversations. Take it away, Marc.
Hi, Marc.
Hi, Liz and Sarah. Thanks very much for that intro. So yeah, it's a 7-year book in the making, and it's something that is effectively a career readiness guide for what I see as 22 and 23-year-old college seniors. But I do know that the relate part of this is to a lot more, and so I'm obviously excited to be a part of your podcast, and I appreciate being on. But it's something that began as an idea. When my kids were in their early 20s, I was the go-to dad to give those pep talks to their friends who were about to graduate college. And you got this, you'll be fine, don't worry. Because, I've had my own business for 35 plus years. And so I enjoyed giving those one-on-one talks so much that I started speaking on college campuses. And then over time, my notes for the speeches became the book. And it's exciting for, especially at this time of year when young people are thinking about the next step in life, or, the next place they work, or what they're going into. It's a good and an easy read how to lower the stress level, if you will.
It's an easy read. It's a fun read. It's actionable. I have a question though. Why do you think they came to you outside of 35 years in business, right? But probably a lot of people that they knew had 35 years in business. Why you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a question that was asked of me by a friend of mine in New York City, Danny Meyer, who's a restaurateur, who is a hospitality and customer service expert, who's written a book called Setting the Table. And Danny, when I told him about my interest in writing this book, he said, "Marc, why you? I'm a guy who owns 19 restaurants in New York City, and I've started Shake Shack. And yes, you are this mentor to your kids' friends and other students, but why you?" And so I went kind of deep, and it's funny. The opening of the book is why me? Thanks to this Danny question. Because I realized that in my business, this is my passion. The Coffee Code is my passion, helping young people to get to the next step in their lives is what I enjoy seeing happen. But my business is selling motivational speakers to major corporations. And in that role as a lecture agent, I find myself in the green room, in the weight room behind the scenes with top name talent who are effectively influencers in this world today. So Mel Robbins and Simon Sinek and Magic Johnson and others, who we will book for speaking opportunities. And there's a lot of downtime before a speaker goes on stage. So, effectively, I have this one-on-one time that is very valuable. Plus, I'm getting to hear these speakers, give their talks. And so I really look at myself as this conduit between an influencer and an individual who doesn't necessarily have the ability to hear some of these stories, these stories of inspiration, of motivation, life hacks, things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. So that becomes the why me of the Coffee Code.
Well, it sounds like you're well equipped to kind of share some potentially do's and don'ts. I will say, and maybe we can kind of go into this, When I entered into psychology, I was grateful. I was like, I don't have to do any of that networking kind of stuff, right? And then I was shocked that I really truly see this in my client population and in my own life in terms of my career through grad school, how much who you knew mattered and how opportunities that like would not end up on my doorstep unless I really put myself out there and really extended myself, put my face in front of people. So you have some like kind of key chapters, but I'd love to like talk maybe about this idea of kind of finding your brand and how to network that brand.
Sure. So the coffee code really has a lot to do with this, and then we can talk about the relationship building. But effectively, when I speak to young people and in the book, I stress the importance of a coffee meeting versus an interview. And a coffee meeting is with somebody that you've identified on LinkedIn at a company that may be one of your target companies, a place you want to work. Now, this person you're identifying and reaching out to on LinkedIn to connect with is effectively someone you're saying, hey, I'd like to get some advice. I'd like to take you to coffee for 5 minutes in a Starbucks near your office. It's a relaxed atmosphere. It's meeting with someone who will not have a job for you, but who may be so darn impressed with you after this 5 or 10 minute informal get together that he or she goes back to their office and says, you know what? I just met this young person who's about to graduate from NYU, and we need to get her before somebody else does. So that's kind of the idea behind the coffee meeting. And compare that to an interview where you're in a box for 5 minutes. And outside that door right there is somebody just hoping you fail. Why? Because they're the next interviewee. And it's just, you want to set yourself up for success. I'm not saying don't get interviews, because the fact of the matter is some companies aren't going to do any accepting of a coffee meeting or interviewing outside of their interview process. But it's funny, my son went to Boston College, and he had a friend who was from Cleveland, went to Boston College, and his name's Derek, and Derek wanted to work here in LA, in Hollywood, in the worst way. But he had no connections whatsoever in Hollywood, at a production company, at an agency, a talent agency, at all. So he used LinkedIn to get coffee meetings. And what ended up happening is he got a job at Warner Brothers, and then he got another job, and he's kind of moved through the ranks, and it's really cool to watch. But what Derek shared with me is an important hack to understand, that in a city, especially like LA, the cool jobs never get posted. So you're not going to find them, in some Indeed website where, here's a great job you should go interview for. You have to be proactive. So this is really about proactivity.
Right.
And I think that the young people don't realize the importance of being more friendly with their professors. And what I like to share with young people is, when a professor shows office hours, you go meet that professor, because that individual, A, could be an adjunct professor, which means that they are currently working somewhere. And they come to your school one day a week and teach you. And if they're working somewhere, they work at a big company and they have their network, okay? Or they're full-time professors who used to work for a company, so they have major networks. Well, you go sit down with these professors, and they know your work ethic. They know who you are. They know the kind of success that you want to have. And when you talk to them, you're sharing with them, hey, this is the field I want to get into. You never know. They may know 3 people in that field that you can meet with.
Right.
So yeah, I just think that to say you don't have a LinkedIn profile or you don't have a lot of connections or contacts right now, that's okay. But I think that you know more people than you think you do. I was mentoring a young person on the phone last week, and he was saying to me that because he had gone to law school, but he wanted to go into business, kind of like I did the same thing. But he was saying to me that he just can't get callbacks, and he's trying to meet all these new people. And I said to him, what you don't realize is the person that you want to meet, you've already met. the person that's going to help you the most already knows you. That person is already in your network. You just have to find that person.
I think that it speaks to the coffee piece to it, which is essentially saying have informal connections and take advantage of them. And coffee, of course, anytime I'm meeting somebody, it's always going to be over a coffee. That's the first place to start. But I think that there is something to be said for those informal connections. I mean, I'm actually going through it now in a new city, trying to expand my practice here. These are things that if you start practicing early will serve you well. And you never know who that person you spoke to, how that can come back and help you. So maybe they're not able to help you yet in your sphere, but keep at it and kind of keep those connections going. I also want to speak more to what you said about the office hours piece. And we've talked to people who say, you know, we just kind of don't know how to use office hours. It's really something where anyone I'm working with, regardless of the reason, office hours, if they're in college, is part of the conversation for a lot of different reasons. But one of them is at some point, letters of recommendation, even if they can't connect you to a person that they know, which I definitely think that that is a big part of it.
Sure.
Formulaic letters of recommendation can be read, those can be seen through. And somebody who you've met, who they have a story to tell, who talks about how you proactively came, even if it was a problem that you have overcome with them, that is a story that they can tell that shows, I know this person. This isn't just a insert name, control F, find, you know, the name, insert whatever kind of letter.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up that specifically because it's kind of the secret sauce, I think, of in college. At least one or two professors out there who are going to be on your team.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny when you look at a young person's resume and you see a bunch of people listed as their references, right? Those people are typically family friends as opposed to business associates. But the fact is, like you just said, Sarah, there may be something about you that family friend knows and that family friend can share with others. You know, when I tell a young person that, you know, let's say a young person gets an interview, okay, and feels that the interview went poorly, right? Well, I say to that person, first of all, you got an interview, which is unbelievable. Most people send in those requests for interviews and they get nothing. You got one, okay?
Crickets.
That's A. B, that interviewer, B, you could have felt the interview went terribly. That person could have thought that they just met the most qualified person they've ever met in their lives, okay? C, that interviewer is now going to reach out to your references, the people that you listed on your resume. Well, so now your references know that you're out there working. You're doing what you're supposed to do with the references, as opposed to just being a name. Like someone says, "Hey, can I put your name on the resume?" Yeah, go ahead. Aha. Now those people know that you're out there doing something with their name. So there's a lot, plus you're gaining the ability to meet with people face to face. That face to face meeting and being able to share more about the brand that is you is so darn important to learn. And once you've done it a few times, it's kind of like once you've done a few podcasts, you start to get the sense of telling the story,
Well, first of all, I think what I heard you say is that our podcast is now sponsored by Shake Shack. Is that what I'm hearing? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, I didn't say that.
Oh, shoot, man. I must have heard something wrong. You dropped some big names. Let's hear some good stories.
Well, the story that I really love is the Magic Johnson story. When Magic was about to retire from the Lakers, he wanted to get into business, but he didn't have that great of a business sense. And so he knew that he needed to reach out to others to help him. He needed advice. And what Magic did was unbelievably smart. So the Lakers used to play at the Forum before they played at the Staples Center. Magic reached out to the ticket office people at the Forum, and he said, "I'd like you to give me a list of all the people that sit in the courtside seats at our games, at our Lakers games at the Forum." And Magic took that list and wrote handwritten notes to each of those people because he knew those were the icons of industry, right? Those were
Mhm.
Right.
the movers and shakers of business, at least here in Los Angeles. Well, I believe that half of those people responded, "Come on in. You know, let's get some advice going. Let me, go ahead, pick my brain." And a couple of those
Yeah.
people are partners of Magic's right now on some of his $1 billion deals. So what
Mm.
I like to challenge a young person with is the fact that you don't have to be Magic Johnson to have a court side. Because like we've just discussed, there are individuals who've known you for 20 years. They're your professors. There's people that know you and know the success pattern or path that you're on right now, and they want to help you. Those people become your first mentors, and you'll have many mentors. I mean, I have many mentors. I'm sure the two of you have. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
old you are. There's going to be someone that will help you on your path.
Right. Yeah. I think I've always liked having people who've been a few years before me, about a decade before me. So, I like to have somebody help me preview all the steps, but maybe that's just me.
Well, yeah, I think, Sarah, there's a story in the coffee code that, the chapters in the coffee code are effectively about creating your own brand, something I like to call Me Incorporated, and then finding a mentor and then building this network of connections, working your plan, and then accepting no and being turned down as part of this game. But the over the umbrella of this process is what I like to think of as giving back. And it's the importance of realizing that, yes, we're all in this game to succeed. We're all in this game to, buy a house, have whatever our level or our definition of success is. That's what we're looking to accomplish. But the one of the things that had pushed my passion along was a cool meeting I had when my daughter got into college to play tennis a number of years ago. And the story goes like this. I was friends at the time with the tennis star Andy Roddick's agent. And Andy's
Hmm.
agent had gotten my daughter and me backstage passes to the Madrid Spain Open. And so
Yeah.
here it is, the day before the tournament starts. Casey and I have our passes, and it's the day
Yeah.
before the tournament starts, and there's nobody around. Except off in the corner, I see somebody I recognize. And it's Richard Williams, Venus and Serena's coach at the time, their father, but their coach at the time.
Right. I was like,
Well,
am I hearing that right?
Richard, King Richard is over in the corner of this room. And so, they're from LA, we're from LA. Heck, this is why Casey's in tennis in the first place. Richard, I'm Marc Reede. This is my daughter, Casey. Casey just got into college to play tennis, and your daughters were the reason she took up tennis in the first place. He says, hang on one second. He says, Venus, Serena. So all of a sudden, the top of these stairs, there's these two girls. Yes, Daddy? Girls, come down here. I want you to meet somebody. But the story doesn't end there, because the next night, Venus had her opening round match against a girl from Madrid. And remember, we're in Madrid. There wasn't
Right.
anybody rooting for Venus Williams in that stadium except us. We're sitting up there,
Hmm.
up in the rafters. Great serve, nice shot, right? Well, Venus beats the girl
Yeah.
in straight sets. Casey knows that Venus is about to leave. So as everyone's leaving the stadium, Casey goes down against the grain to get as close as she can to congratulate her new friend. Well, but I'm watching Venus when she's zipping up her bag, and she looks up at me and she mouths the words, "Where's Casey?" Well, I'm as floored right
Oh,
now as I was then.
yeah.
It was unbelievable. So
Yeah.
I point to where I knew Casey was, right? So I see Venus get up and run over to where I've just pointed. Now 5 minutes go by. It seems like an eternity, right? Well, all of a sudden, here comes Casey
Right.
coming up the stairs, tears coming down her eyes, holding Venus's tournament towel that you can't buy.
Get out.
Yeah, get
Ugh.
out.
Oh.
So now we're leaving the stadium, and once again we see Richard Williams, and I tell him the story I just told you. He takes Casey and me in
Hmm.
a group hug, and he says, "You know something, Mark? If you had told me that my daughter just played a great match, I would have said thank you very much. That's her job. That's why she works out so
Yeah.
hard every single day." But he says, I taught my girls a long time ago to touch one person in life, Show them you
Mm-hmm.
care. Share your
Yep.
gift, and look what can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a story that I love to share with young people, because it kind of puts all of this into perspective, A, and B, it teaches young people the value of storytelling, of being a storyteller. Because in this life, in this world, in this success path, you need to be able to be a great storyteller. You need something where a person interviewing you, or a potential business partner, or whoever it may be, remembers you by. It doesn't have to be as long a story as the Venus and Casey story. It can be
Right.
something about your travels, or a job you had, or something
Right.
that you did in your life.
I love this story for a couple of reasons. One, I think that this generation is, I believe, has a view that a lot of people are hostile, that there aren't really a lot of people that want to help them, right? And I think that I always remind a lot of kids I work with, I'm like, everyone's been in your shoes before, like trying to find that first job, reaching for a dream, right? And
Yeah.
that you'll never encounter those people unless you walk down there and scream out to them or approach them, ask for a cup of coffee, whatever it might be. That people inherently, there are people that are wanting to help and really can kind of do that location perspective of like, I was there at one point. So, and that can be hard, I think, to remember because of rejection. The sensitivity to rejection and accepting no is I think it's a skill. Like, how do you kind of persevere in the face of rejection? So you talk a little bit about this in the book, about how to accept that it's inevitable, right? And how to use it potentially to your advantage or part of your plan.
So we all use rejection in different ways. Yes, there's a tendency to get bummed out and mope around and whatever. But while you're bummed out and moping around, the competitor for that same job is figuring out a
Right.
way how to get back in. When you're on this path and you feel like you've been punched in the stomach, you have to
Yeah.
pause. You have to pause. You
Mm-hmm.
you have to get back and regroup, and when you're
Mm-hmm.
ready, come back into the game.
Yeah.
The fact is that young people right now, they have access and knowledge of so much technology and so many, the inner workings of so many things that a lot of individuals in the workplace currently don't. So young people are winning this game. Young people applying for jobs are winning this game because they know a lot of stuff that the interviewers don't. And I think that a college senior, a recent grad, a grad student needs to realize that it's kind of advantage you. It's not advantage them. You have a voice. So it's important for students that are looking for jobs, looking for whatever, that they are a lot more important than they think that they are sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth getting upset if you don't get an interview, if you get turned down, if something happens. You just learn from that. And then how
Yeah.
can we learn again from that? I mean, if you talk to successful entrepreneurs, they're all going to tell you that it didn't just happen. Because Chuck, if it just happened, everybody be doing it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's got to take figuring out how to get there. There's a story that Mark Randolph tells. He was the co-founder of Netflix, and
Mm-hmm.
and Mark's story is that he was a senior at a college in upstate New York, and there was an ad agency in New York City that he really wanted to work at. And so he had gone through all these levels of interview with this company at his school, and they flew 4 people down to New York for this final set of interviews. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he went through and he felt like he'd almost met everyone at the company. Gets back home, gets a note from these people saying, "Hi, you didn't get the job." He's like, "What the heck? Are you kidding? I did exactly what they wanted. I was the perfect fit for them." So he sends an email
Yep.
and he says, "Hi, I was the perfect fit. I really want to work at your company. What did I do wrong? How can I get better?" They said, you know what? Come back down to New York. I want to talk to you. And they gave him the job. Gave him the job. They didn't give it to anybody. They wanted to wait to see who wanted it the worst. Who was willing to say, time out, I should be your person. So, so there you have rejection in the fullest.
I think that it's been so great to hear all these points that are wrapped up in some good stories.
Well, thank you, Mark, for being on. I think ultimately I can see why you are getting hired to give talks on college campuses. I hope some of the college students that I work with have the opportunity to hear you. If I could take like one takeaway that I really value from everything that you talked about was just your mindset in terms of how college students can approach this. Like there's so much like energy, curiosity, intention, and even in that last piece of what you were talking about, right? That, and it's a lot of what we do clinically as psychologists, right? That how you react to things really is going to indicate how you're going to change your behavior or not, right? So I'm really excited. I mean, this has been like a long time coming. College students have asked us to have an episode around career readiness, and I know a lot of them are navigating all this with a compass that doesn't work. So I hope this really helps steer them in a good direction.
I appreciate it. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me.